Hello everyone, this is In-Game Mars with another boxing, another offline product game review. This is Cyberpunk 2077, the Ultimate Edition for the PlayStation 5. To jump right into it, this physical copy here comes with the update version 2.0.3 right on disc, but sadly there wasn't an update available. This update size was 18.1 gigabytes big and will take you to version 2.12.0, so it's the time to make this video. Now like always, I play all my games completely offline with an unregistered account, and I cannot claim my experience was flawless, but I still beat the game and did a majority of the content completely offline with an unregistered account, and as well I was still unlocking trophies with my unregistered account. Now this is the first time I have ever played Cyberpunk 2077. I never played the PS4 version. I do recall and seeing many of the complaints about when that game first came out, that the physical copy version on disc is basically a coaster. There's really no value to the PS4 version. Thankfully this PS5 version has a mass majority of the updates on disc, so it does fix a lot of the issues, and as I said, I did beat the game and did a majority of the side quests with little to no problems. Now that doesn't mean the game was 100% flawless, but before we go into, I do want to point out another big flaw is that this Ultimate Edition, while it is more updated on disc with, as I said, 2.03 version on disc, the Phantom Liberty DLC content is not on disc. This is a redeem code. I will go into a little bit more details about my opinions about this redeem code, and why it's weird is that the Xbox version of Cyberpunk 2077, the Ultimate Edition, has the Phantom Liberty DLC on the disc. The PS5 version does not have the DLC on the disc. Again, I will go into a little bit more detail. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to go over a lot of the issues I experienced. First off, NPCs. Many of the NPCs did little weird oddities, whether a normal civilian walking across the street, or a character I'm talking to, or an enemy NPC. Doing little weird things, like sometimes I would have an enemy coming at me doing a T-pose, and then immediately it fixed itself and now it's pointing its gun at me. Or sometimes I would have an NPC that a character I'm talking to, and he's turning around to walk away and he's going through walls or going through objects and everything's blown up around them. Not the biggest of deals, but it is immersion breaking, and sometimes it's quite hilarious because it's quite funny to see some enemies coming at me with a T-pose. It didn't happen a lot, but it did happen quite significantly throughout my experience of the game. Next, getting near objects, sometimes everything wants to blow up. Like sometimes I will go into a closet and there's a bunch of cardboards or items and I'm not even nowhere near it, and next thing you know, everything just starts, all the objects around me starts exploding around me. It's very weird, and always weird when I'm trying to be stealthy and the next thing you know, I walk into a room and all these objects are starting to explode around me. Very weird when that happens. As well as that there is some FPS dropping in the game. This isn't too significant. Now, if you're a stickler about FPS dropping, you may get frustrated with it. For me, it was noticeable, but it wasn't game-breaking or disruptive to my gameplay experience. But sadly, there was a few times the game got into a game-breaking stutter mode, where all of a sudden the game would just start slowing down and stuttering to a complete, almost like a single frame per second problem. It has to be maybe some kind of NPC or some item or some object is doing some weird collision and it's causing the game to dip in its frame rate or go into some stutter mode. It happened twice throughout my experience. Basically all I had to do was just close out the game and boot the game back up, and it fixed the issue. Next up, I did have the game freeze up a few times on me, where not stuttering and not crashing. I did have the game freeze up, where my character would just stop moving and I couldn't do anything. Thankfully, hitting the PlayStation button, exit out of the game, I just closed out the application and rebooted it back up. As well as I did have 2 normal game crashes throughout the experience of the game. So there is that. Next up, there was a dust cloud in the game throughout the campaign. You eventually got to save some character, and there's a dust cloud in the distance. And boy, this thing was flickering like crazy. It did not like whatever was going on with it. Just a strobe of flickering assets of the cloud. On top of that, there's a few times where the game's graphical assets started flickering and glitching out. There was one time there was a character I was talking to, and I was going on a date with this character, and her hair was a gray color, and then when I went on this date, her hair was black, jet black. I thought it was like, oh, she dyed her hair black, I guess, for this date. And next thing you know, next time I talked to her, it was back gray again. I was like, was that a bug? And then next thing you know, I talked to this other person, and I noticed it was all jet black. I was like, oh, okay. It was a bug, and there's a few other little graphical bugs like that. But moving on, one oddity one is that during the options menu, if you go into the zoom, like adjust the sensitivity, and you adjust the sensitivity of your zooming down your gun, it's the opposites. So when you lower the zooming sensitivity, the sensitivity goes up. So if you lower the number, it's faster movement. If you raise the number, it slows down the sensitivity. I know that's very confusing, but just keep that in mind. If you go to the zoom aim sensitivity, higher number means slower speeds. Next up, there's a few times there was dead audio. No point of where like characters are talking and their audio cut out or anything like that, but like I'm climbing into something or I'm surrounded by stuff and clearly should be making noise and it's just dead silence. It's very awkward. There's a few times I wasn't even sure if it was a bug, but the game seemed to constantly have some form of ambience or some kind of sound was going on. There was a few times where there was just dead audio. Characters still talked, but any objects around me didn't make any noise. Next up, I do want to point out, if you're someone who maybe wants to do different languages, let's say French or Spanish and so forth, if you go into the settings and you go into checking the languages and you see a little download button, do not worry, you do not need internet to download these language packages. It just installs it from the disk. So just keep that in mind. If you like to hear French or anything like that, just go to languages and just click on that arrow and it will start installing it from the disk. You do not need internet to download voice acting for French, Spanish, Brazilian, so on and so forth. So keep that in mind. As well as I did have a few times where when I was upgrading my guns, like if I put like a silencer or a scope on my gun, the tiers, because every item has a tier of upgrading, so you have like level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and when I started putting tiers higher than 1, there was a few times where I unequipped that gun and re-equipped it, and it resetted all my tier guns equipment back to level 1. So if I had like a tier 4 or tier 5 silencer, I unequipped that gun and re-equipped it, it dropped it back down to all the way tier 1. It happened to a few guns, like one gun I had where it shot like money, where you shoot it and it takes up your money, and another gun, like a sniper rifle that shot, was it sniper rifle? It was like some rifle or something like that that had like a scope on it and it resetted that. So that was a little annoying. And that's about it in terms of game-breaking issues. I can't see anything. I did write a bunch of this stuff down, so bear with me. But that's about it. Now, there could have been some more oddities, hiccups, strange things, but that's about it throughout my experience of the game. I never had where a quest was unbeatable or uncompletable, and everything else ran smoothly and everything like that. It's just minor little hiccups and glitches. Another one, actually, I don't have it written down here, is when I killed an enemy, oftenly their guns or their weaponry will somewhat clip through the ground or fall through the ground, so it's very aggravating when I try to kill an enemy and want to pick up their loot. Their weaponry would fall on the ground or is clipping through the ground, so that could be very aggravating that you're losing loot because it's falling through the ground, or you can't see it because it's so clipped through the ground you can't even see it. But that's about it. The other things I could talk about is my personal preferences. But before we go into that, I just want to say that I did beat it. I did the majority of the side quests. I wanted to be completely thorough with this game. There might have been a few side quests that I didn't find, but I did do a majority of the game. I put about 70 hours in this game. I got to max level 50. I did all the dialogues. I tried to went through all the trees and stuff like that to test everything. And majority of the game did work and play it. I did beat it, and I will be perfectly honest, I did have a pretty good time with this game. Now, I have made this appointed immediately that I am not a fan of huge open world games, and sadly, Cyberpunk 2077 is not any different for me in that field. But at least it makes up in other areas, like the characters are all extremely good. The main story of the game is extremely good, which was surprising because I didn't like Witcher 3's main story. That was like the worst part of that game, was Witcher 3's main story was just boring. But Witcher 3 had amazing side quests that I liked more than the main story. While in Cyberpunk 2077, I loved the main story just as much as I loved doing the side quests, and I loved interacting with the majority of the characters in the game. That was really good, and though I am not a graphics person, and I do not care anything for graphics, I'm be honest. Yes, graphically the game was gorgeous at moments, like looking at a beach or something like that, and seeing the sunset and certain environmental pieces were just very jaw-dropping, impressive that we can achieve that in video games. And technically, this is somewhat a PlayStation 4 game, though it really shouldn't have been. But it's still impressive that they were able to try to at least somewhat do this on a PlayStation 4. I never played the PS4 version, so don't tell me how bad it runs. I'm just saying graphically. Now, next up is that these are going to be some of my personal nitpicks. I've already pointed out that I'm not a fan of the huge open world. That's still the worst part of Cyberpunk 2077, is that the open world is just atrociously bad and it ruins the game in a majority of the way. Oftenly, I just got aggravated when I did a quest. I got to immediately go drive to this long distance. I don't deny that the game actually gave me depression. At the beginning of the game, I got a quest to go meet this one lady, and I drove all this way to go talk to this lady, and this lady took like 2 to 3 minutes long. And then immediately as I got done with that, it told me to drive a distance of far away to continue the quest. I legitimately got hit with depression when I saw my mini-map tell me that I gotta drive ridiculously far again to a new location. If I wasn't doing this YouTubing and stuff like that, or promised that I would cover this game offline for you guys, I probably would have dropped that game right then and there because of that just annoyance of I do not enjoy driving around and running around an empty world. I know people love that and they don't like me talking about that because for some reason they love doing nothing in video games. But for me, I hate it. I just hate it. But I'm glad I stuck with it because I still love the story and the characters and somewhat of the gameplay. But we go into gameplay, there are some problems. While the gameplay worked, I did like the variety of approaches you could do, from stealth to straight up gun bang shooting, and then or if you want to do hacking. Really cool. Really love that. But I didn't really like is the loot system in the game. I'm not a big looter person, so I got really annoyed with having all these kinds of guns and equipments, and I got really annoyed at having level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 5 equipment. Didn't really find that fun or enjoyable. It wasn't until I got to like max level when I no longer got I was only getting tier 5 equipment when I started finding the game's loot interesting, because I never found that interesting to get so many different level loot. On top of that, they basically throw their loot system right out the door because they have this loot called exotic equipment or boss guns, where these are high-profile weaponry that are unique. And so immediately now all your loot's useless because now you're going to want to use is the exotic, unique guns because they got special abilities attached to them. So it just felt weird. I'd rather them did a better equipment and gear set up than this whole loot and tier system. Really badly done in that. As well as that, leveling up felt very pointless. I did like putting attributes, and I did like how that affected some kind of dialogue options or doing certain actions like opening up a door or hacking. The attribute points made sense. It was the perks that I wasn't a fan of. A lot of it felt useless. A lot of it was just mundane little stat upgrades that really didn't go noticeable. I'll be perfectly honest, I played a mass majority of this game, and I got to like level 45 or something like that, and I still had nearly 30 perk points that I never used. And it's just because I saw no reason to use the perk points. I just never had no value for it. So they definitely dropped the ball on the perk points. And that's about it in terms of gameplay. I was a little disappointed too that there's no real kill or no kill difference to the game. Now there are moments where the game tries to suggest not killing, which is kind of cool, but it did a little disappointing that there are moments where the game really just heavily requires you to kill, and I would have liked it if they maybe approached it where you could go throughout the entire game without killing someone if you wanted to do a pacifist route, if you wanted to, if you so choose to. I know some people get triggered with that kind of stuff, but to me, I like options. I like having multiple ways people can approach games, whether you want to talk or use violence, or you want to just not kill anybody, but you will defend yourself kind of stuff. And that's about it. Overall, like I said, I enjoyed the game. I had a lot of fun with the characters, the gameplay. It was all good. But man, that open world aspect of the game just kills the game. It's like Breath of the Wild for me. Every time I pop in Breath of the Wild, I remember all those great puzzles and using the items to navigate around the levels and stuff. But the second I look at that open world, or minute I have to run around in that open world and do nothing, it sucks the fun completely out of the game, because now you're just wasting my time. While I put like 70 hours in this game, I will say probably 30 of that 70 was actually playing the game. The rest of that was just running around doing nothing, trying to get to the next location. I do not understand why people find that fun. I just find it depressing that we have developers getting away with giving you the illusion of content. But before we go into that rant, I wanted to go into the next topic, and that is that the game's DLC is on a redeem code. Now, if you're unaware, on this channel, we do not do DLC updates, microtransactions, or redeem codes. If the content isn't on the disc and it's fully playable offline with an unregistered account, it does not matter. That content is irrelevant. It's non-existent to me. I do not care. I do not care if it's free. I do not care if they give me a redeem code. I will not use it. So it is hugely disappointing that CD Projekt Red did not put the DLC on the disc. Now, I have seen some reports and some people say this is something Sony did and it's Sony's fault and not CD Projekt Red's fault. Now, there's no real evidence of what is the cause of this. The only thing is that I find it very dubious. Only because of, first off, I've heard some people try to claim that it's because Sony has some new policy that they make it harder for games to be released with DLC on disc. I've heard these statements. I don't really believe it. First off, is that this is not the first time we've seen a game from PlayStation and Xbox have different physical copies. Where, like, there's a game called Grip, the Ultimate Edition, and the Xbox version has the DLC on the disc, but the PS4 version has a redeem code. This is back on PlayStation 4, and the most glaring evidence that I think that that philosophy it's Sony's fault is untrue is that there was recently a game that came out called Potion Permit Complete Edition, and this came out after Cyberpunk 2077 Ultimate Edition, and that Potion Permit Complete Edition has all the DLC on the disc. So why is it that a game as small as Potion Permit can have DLC on the disc, but Cyberpunk 2077 from CD Projekt Red couldn't have the DLC on the disc, and it's because Sony has some policy that makes it difficult? I find that highly questionable. I don't know the real reasons why it is the way this is. The only thing that I can always say is that always follow the money. The reason is that, to personally believe me, is that PlayStation games physical copies sell more than Xboxes. So if there's going to be a used game, which Cyberpunk 2077, this open edition I have right here, is a used copy. And therefore, they probably did a redeem code because they wanted to make sure if used copies got sold, that people would pay for the redeem code to be able to download the DLC. I don't think it has anything to do with policies or some Sony doing some corrupted thing. Maybe they are evil. Maybe they are doing some weird, stupid thing about re-releases with DLC on disc. But that doesn't change the fact that a game like called Potion Permit Complete Edition has a DLC on the disc. So clearly, if they have some policy, it's not that bad of a policy if a small game like Potion Permit can pull off and have DLC on the disc. It cracks me up because I just feel like it's another evil corporation doing a thing that makes it where it's not fair for the consumer, to give the consumer a bad product, which is ironic because Cyberpunk 2077 is about evil corporations doing horrible things to the consumer and just doing everything they can to cut prices and do horrible budget cuts and all this other stuff. So it just cracks me up that CD Projekt Red, I think they fooled people twice. I think they first time they released it, they misled people with the PS4 version, and a bunch of people bought it, and a lot of people didn't refund it, so they got a bunch of money for that. And then they got this PS5 release, and now you got people trying to say it's not CD Projekt Red's fault, it's Sony's fault. And really, I just think this CD Projekt Red just tricked people again and released a PS5 version and not put the DLC in the disc because they wanted to make sure they got money from the used game market from the physical copies. This is why I didn't want the video to be long. We have a whole rant about that. I debated about making a separate video, but I wanted to include it in this video. In the end, this is still a good physical copy, but it's a disappointment. So therefore, it has to be treated harshly. I don't care how much fun I had with the game. I don't care how good the game is and how much this PS5 version fixed a lot of issues. The point is that there's still an update, which is 18 gigabytes, as well as the DLC is not on the disc. So it will be treated harshly. Now, I will be a little bit more nicer because at least it's a new physical copy that actually works compared to the PS4 version. But the point is still a fact. It remains as that this is a half-assed physical version of Cyberpunk 2077, and they put a lot of effort into to make sure the game still, the game's been out for so long and it still has bugs, and it still has an 18 gigabyte update, as well as that they didn't put the DLC on the disc. So, man, this is my personal opinion. If you want to pick up a copy, I do recommend it. I do recommend maybe getting a used copy just so you don't support CD Projekt Red for this half-assed physical version. but that's my personal opinion. If everything you've heard sounds good to you, then yeah, go ahead and pick it up. I still had fun. I'm happy to have it on my shelf. I just wish that City Project Red just cared a little bit more about the consumers. So like always, thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video was helpful for to you. I know we went off through a lot and it was a lot over the cock about, but there's just a lot of information I wanted to provide. So in the end, thank you all for sticking through this and hearing my opinions and hearing that this physical copy is a decent physical copy to add to your shelf. So again, thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!